Uh, Call the meeting to order. Thanks everyone for being here. Happy New Year to everyone. First thing on the agenda is approval of previous meeting minutes. Can I get an approval in a second? First, second. Thank you very much. Any board member comments?
Not really, maybe just Happy New Year, welcome back, and is there any ice fishing on the agenda?
Let's hope not, but. Okay, moving on. Tom?
I just wanted to remind everybody, it's that time of year when we are asking people to consider running for the board of directors. The next informational meeting is on January 21st at 4 o'clock in this room. So if you're interested in considering running for the board, we encourage you to be informed and attend the meeting, and you'll learn a lot about it. And that is all I had to say. Happy New Year.
All right, with that, I'll turn it over to Rick, Rick.
All right, so we have a few things to go over here. Just want to go over the Norwood.
Just want to go over the Norwood drawdown again. That started on November the 4th and will be complete by March the 3rd. We're going to be dredging the back of the lake as soon as John frees up the heavy equipment from the gun range. And we're going to also lengthen the boat ramp. That lake is periodically low, and when it's low, the ramp is too short. As you would expect, the month of December was pretty slow for our lake rangers. 1,442 contacts, 35 folks removed, 20 by boat, and 12 and a half hours on the water. That is actually up, though the numbers are low, they are up over the previous year for the same month by about 400. In grounds maintenance, we hired a new full-time grounds maintenance worker last week. Shout out to our HR department. We interviewed this gentleman on Thursday, and he started yesterday. So they're getting folks turned around for us really quickly. Brittany has been down for some time, like Brittany has been down for some time. We have been able to get the pump online, and it is flowing currently and doing what it can to fill up the lake. We are still planning some dam burns later this winter. I'm working on gathering our required permits for 2025. We've got about 6 or 8 permits that we have to renew every year. And we still have to dredge the area around Granton and London Landing before warm weather. Our aquaculture ponds produced for us this year. We stocked straight bass in Lake Ann, Loman, and Windsor. 300 in Ann, 800 in Loman, 600 in Windsor. That saved us $14,600 over purchasing them. That's even after we backed out the cost of feed. We also stocked all of our lakes with channel catfish. I'll spare the details on that, but it's a normal stocking. Our trout were stocked for the second time on Lake Brittany. On December the 19th, 632 fish were stocked. We are currently collecting Christmas trees at Lake Ann Park. For those who have a cut Christmas tree to donate, we'll take them there. And we're also collecting structures that the Bella Vista Fly Tyers have constructed for us, artificial habitat. We're getting quite a stockpile of that. That'll be going into Lake Norwood later this winter. Let's see, things that are new for the net last month. Just to review again, we're going to stock threadfin shad this spring. 60,000 of those will go into Loch Lomond. And a creel survey will be implemented in the spring. So if you see a young gentleman who is eager to ask you questions, please give them the time of day, and it'll help get your voice out for what you want to see as far as fish management in our lakes.
Is he gonna be out on the lakes just
He will.
pulling people,
He's
or-
going to be tagging along with lake rangers. He'll be at the boat ramps primarily, but he will also be out on the boats with the rangers, and
Is it gonna be in the spring?
spring through the summer. His employment will end midsummer, but we may extend it into the fall a little bit with our staff.
Okay, good.
Just a quick question, a rough order of magnitude on how many channel catfish were stocked, just total?
Total,
just out of my.
5,000,
Okay.
and they were about 6 to 8 inches, so.
Any other questions for Rick on anything before we move on? I got a call the other day, or an email, someone was asking about potentially putting bug-resistant lights on and near boat docks at Loch Lomond. Is that something that's feasible? And
I don't see why not. I don't know the specifics about that, whether it's a color variation or it's some sort of frequency they put out. I don't really know. I believe Trey knows about it. Is Trey with us today?
I didn't see his name.
this week.
Okay, and it sounded like Trey was amenable to that.
Okay, because this person even offered to pay for the lights and just to sample it. You know, he was suggesting maybe the yellow lights that are bug resistant. Because apparently his boat, it's spiders and things like
Yeah,
that.
Trey's aware.
Okay,
I know there's the yellow, and there's also that flickering that doesn't draw them as bad. So
really? Okay.
I'm sure those are probably more expensive than just the yellow, but
flickering might get a little aggravating if you're.
might be.
Especially if you have epilepsy.
Disco, yeah. Jesus.
And then the results of the fall shocking, is that?
We're going
present-
to present that next month.
Next month, okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else for Rick before we move on?
Can you comment, you talked about the water pumping into Brittany. I think it's important to mention that that's gonna help, but that's not gonna solve it. Rain is what
Yes.
is needed.
Yeah,
Maybe you could elaborate.
the pump will, over time, bring the lake up. More than anything, it'll prevent it from going down any further. It's only a 4-inch pipe, but it will help. So yeah, it's not a cure. It's part of the fix, not the cure.
And we haven't gotten any measurable rainfall, so it's
Not enough for a lot of runoff anyway.
it's not really helping. Anything else, Rick? Go around. Tom, I think you had something that you wanted to show, or?
Yeah, Rich
Oh,
got a
Rick does.
presentation.
Do I need a mic or anything? Or, will it pick up my voice? All right. Thank you. There's been some concern over the last couple years about our largemouth bass management in Bella Vista Lakes. And so I wanted to take the opportunity today to kind of go over the past, the present, and where we're trying to go in the future with largemouth bass management. So anyway, we'll move it along. So I ask that this presentation is likely going to bring up a lot of questions. I ask that you please hold your questions until the end to keep me focused. That would be appreciated. In the past, so I'm speaking primarily of Loch Lomond, since that is our primary fishing lake of note. It comprises about half of our surface acres of water. And so The peak productivity of any new lake generally occurs between 8 and 12 years after it's constructed. And for Loch Lomond, the peak years were in the late 80s. And so game fish tend to exhibit fast growth early on. They reach large sizes due to the fact that they have low competition. A set number of fish were stocked into the lake. It takes a little bit for those fish to reach maturity where they can start reproducing on their own. And so for that first little bit, there are very few fish in the lake. So the fish that are there can get larger. And that's kind of a theme for what we're talking about here. Also, you get there's a lot of organics in the soil. And over time, that decomposes, breaks down, releases into the water, and gets into the food chain, the aquatic food chain. There comes a time when those nutrient inputs are depleted. And that tends to happen somewhere after 12 years when a new reservoir is built. And believe it or not, it's not the old lakes that produce the big fish, it's the younger lakes. And with peak production and some of the larger fish coming in those first 10 years after the lake is constructed. And at that time, Loch Lomond was producing multiple largemouth bass over 10 pounds in the late 80s and early 90s. So we'll move along. Also in the past, once you get into the early 90s, the decline in the fishery was noticed by the residents and by the management staff at the time too. And so a way to keep high productivity in a lake is to start fertilizing, which was done. We had no aquatic vegetation at that time. That's also to be noted. And so fertilization by the use of urea fertilizer and an aquatic fertilizer high in potassium is typically what is used, and that was used then. So a plan was developed and first implemented in the spring of 1994, and that came with the assistance of the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission to fertilize the water artificially, which that increases plankton growth, which in turn increases the amount of food available for bait fish, which then in turn increases their numbers along with invertebrates like crayfish and that kind of thing, and ultimately game fish at the top of the food chain. And this program revived the quality of the largemouth bass fishery quite significantly. But in following through with this plan, it wasn't followed properly. A little fertilizer helped a little bit, so a lot of fertilizer is going to help a lot more, right? Well, maybe, but it caught the eye of the residents of the lake and those that aren't necessarily interested in fishing, but more concerned about the aesthetics. And so we had a time when the lake turned pea soup green, and because of that, a citizens group was organized that was against fertilization, and this resulted in the cessation of the fertilization program in late 2002. And in addition to that, because of some other concerns with water pollution related to the poultry industry and spreading manure on fields and that kind of stuff, it was made illegal to fertilize bodies of water without a nutrient management plan. And so there was a time where there was no fertilization at all. And again, the quality of the fishing, the productivity of the lake went down. And my predecessor noticed this and actually developed a nutrient management plan with the help of John and the University of Arkansas. And they put together a model which looked at a lot of different factors: temperature, time of year, all kinds of different things went into this model to decide how and when to fertilize. And so this what we've been using since then, and we've been able to fertilize because of this plan. And so what we do, we've talked about our SECI readings in this committee. We have a volunteer group that goes out and they measure the water clarity with a SECI disc. They report back to us. Actually, they go into a spreadsheet that is shared. They put in their reading. They'll do that on a Monday by midday. And then generally by Wednesday, we're able to take any lakes that need fertilizer and get it done. And so what this allows us to do is keep a consistency in the amount of nutrients in the lake so that our plankton doesn't hit a boom-bust cycle where it completely disappears. So it's always available. We fertilize when it starts to decline, and then that revives it. That keeps the food chain going so that our small fish are never without something to eat. And so that has been very good for us. The model still works beautifully more than 10 years after it was implemented, and I can't say enough about that. And just for those who may be concerned about adding nutrients to the water, we are very careful about that, and we have a way of measuring ourselves by, we do the water quality testing in the streams as well. All of our lakes end up going into Little Sugar Creek, the outflow. The water coming into Bella Vista at the south end of town has more nutrients in it than the water leaving Bella Vista at the state line. So we feel like we are not adversely contributing to the nutrients of the aquatic system. So this kind of puts into a graphical form what I had just talked about. So you've got, is this a laser pointer or just an advancer?
Yeah, the laser pointer is here. It's right there.
Okay. Yeah, top button. Okay. So right here is where you expect a lake to be 6 or 8 years after it's built. You've got all these nutrient inputs coming in to the lake, and it maximizes its output right here. And then you get a decline until you reach a steady state. And then you have little fluctuations where sometimes you're doing a little better, sometimes you're doing a little worse, but it reaches sort of a steady state. And what fertilizer will do is you're never going to get up here to this peak, but instead of having your steady state be here, you might get your steady state up here. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So in the past, I mentioned earlier that when the lake was newly built, there was no aquatic weeds. Well, sometime in the 2000s, we did start getting some of our native aquatic weeds. What's on the lower left is brittle naiad. It's a real dense, almost looks like clouds in the water. It's under the surface. And what's on the right is water willow. It comes up out of the water. Both of these provide excellent nursery habitat for small fish. But then again, there are times when we have too much of a good thing. And we had excessive aquatic weeds in the 2010s. We controlled that by spraying, and Chris Fuller actually redesigned our spray rig to where it was much more efficient. We were doing really well. We were able to keep some aquatic vegetation where we could allow it. We were eliminating it around folks' docks and swimming areas and everything. Things were going really good. And this resulted in a balanced fishery during the years of 2018 to 2021. I'm sure, Matt, you can attest to the fact that we had some good fish at that time. But good things don't always last. And we had an invasive plant show up, parrot feather. It's really pretty plant there on the lower left. That's kind of an individual plant. You can see how it grows in really massive mats. You can't you can't motor through it. It's a plant that is sold at water garden shops and aquariums. And then folks, when they get tired of their aquariums, tend to end up throwing their contents in our lakes. And I'm sure that's what happened in this case. But the plant first appeared on Loch Lomond in 2018. It spread quickly. We soon discovered that we couldn't keep up with chemical treatments alone. The weed harvester that we have works great. It picks up a bunch of it, but it also leaves some fragments behind. And with this specific weed, each fragment will root and produce a new plant. So by using our weed harvester, you can actually exacerbate the problem. So we made the decision to stock grass carp. There is an amount of grass carp that are recommended, but if we wanted to eradicate the weed, we needed to go beyond that, which is what we did. And by 2021, July, we didn't see parrot feather anymore, but I wanted to see another year, so by the fall of 2022, we considered the weed eradicated. So just kind of showing the trends in largemouth bass at that time. This is our catch per unit effort graphs. It looks kind of complicated, but each line is a different lake, and Loch Lomond is highlighted, so it's the blue, kind of the color of my shirt there. And so catch per unit effort of fish in the in the mid 2010s was really high. And then since then it's actually come down a bit, but you can see that this is where we should be for this area, around 120 fish per hour. We were well beyond that, some years close to 500 fish per hour. That's well beyond what we should be. And because of that, they were predating more than they would be optimal on bluegill. And you can see that our bluegill catch rates are in the 25th percentile, where our mean should be up here. So it's just a way of quantitatively determining what we're seeing with our eyes. So again, a different way to look at it. Each one of these bars represent a different year. So in years where you have, and this is a percentage of the catch, in years where you have a lot of small fish, you tend to have very few large fish, and vice versa. This is 2021, actually was a year that we had few small fish, and we had quite a few larger fish. But then beyond that, in the years since then, we've reverted back to more like this 2015 graph. So just another way to show this, again, this is about 2022. A lot of age 1 fish. Your age 1 fish are going to be your small fish, around 6 inches or so. A lot there, and then at the same time, 2022, you've got very few 15-inch plus fish there. So what we preach over and over again is we would like our members to keep more of the small guys, which ensures that we have more of the big guys. Hello. That's interesting. Okay, and so this data in a lot more detail. I want to show you where you can find it. Go to the Bella Vista homepage, and I can't see that well. So click on Things to Do under Lakes, Fishing, and then Fish Population Analysis. And if you want to go a little deeper and see our water quality analysis as well to confirm what we're talking about with nutrients, you can see it there. And then also, presently, now that we've gotten rid of the parrot feather, the next thing to do is to try to remove as many grass carp as we can. This was a couple individuals that helped us out one day shooting grass carp with bow and arrow. We have installed an exclusion fence on Loch Lomond to try to get some the native vegetation back, primarily the brittle naiad, which will then help to reseed the rest of the lake. We're also building the Arkansas cubes. Now that we're in the new budget year, we have money available, and Chris is going to be buying that material, and we're going to get those built. We hope to get about 15 such Arkansas cubes on Loch Lomond, placed at the backs of all the coves, and we have located a source of coontail, not an aquatic plant that we typically have on our lakes, but it is a very preferred plant. It doesn't need to be rooted. It is native, and it produces seeds. We can put those in these Arkansas cubes. They will produce seeds, and it's kind of like a salt shaker. They're just cranking out seeds that'll help restore vegetation to the lake. Then at some point, when we get that back, we are going to have to go back to spraying around folks' docks and those kind of things. We're not going to forget about those, but there is room to have weeds. I shouldn't say weeds. There is room to have vegetation in the lake and still have happy lakefront property owners. So this is a picture of the Arkansas cube, lower left. Arkansas must have a pretty good marketing team to rename something that was first done in another state, the Arkansas cube. I think maybe they made some modifications. And this is a picture, and I believe that is coontail, putting vegetation in that structure. And then the PVC ensures that the structure floats, and then it'll be anchored down so it won't move. So we're also providing some artificial habitat, Christmas trees that we do every year. I believe I said earlier that we're collecting those at Lake Ann Park this year for Lake Ann. We're also using the labor and the funds from the Bella Vista Fly Tires. They're helping us out this year building these porcupine structures and then just various other structures that will help provide a habitat for fish until we can get the vegetation going. We are doing a big project on Lake Norwood. After we dredge the lake this year, we're going to go in and put a lot of these structures in there, really hit that one hard and get it to the point where it's actually noticeable, the return we get for doing that. So in the future, so the 4 aquaculture ponds that we worked really hard to get and convinced the board that they were necessary are going to be paying off for us. We were able to use them this year to grow some bluegill. We're going to switch completely over to providing forage fish for the lakes. That's the great thing about these, is we can kind of pivot and do whatever we need to do from year to year. And so we're going to do 2 ponds with a threadfin shad, which is on the lower left. We're going to do 2 ponds of bluegill, get those stocked into the lake. The issue with threadfin shad is we're on the northern extent of their range, and when we get an extremely cold winter, they tend to die out. So we will be able to keep those in tanks through the winter, a few brood fish, enough to get us going again. And then we can put those in the spring, we can put those back in our aquaculture ponds and crank out more fish for the next year when we have that kind of thing happen. And then once we get the vegetation going, the lake should be self-supportive as long as we can get some help in harvesting some of the largemouth bass. So we talked about the threadfin. We're going to stock 60,000 of those in Loch Lomond. And we're going to be producing our own bluegill. So a question you might have is why threadfin shad when we already have gizzard shad? Gizzard shad are only consumable for about 2 months during the summer before they get too big. I've seen gizzard shad up to 22 inches in length, and there's really nothing here that can consume something that big. So all of that body mass is tied up in something that's not consumable. It doesn't really provide a fishing opportunity for anyone. So they're not the preferred shad to have. And whereas the threadfin shad, again, remain consumable for their entire life. So I think I've covered what's left on that slide. So what to expect? The return of aquatic vegetation will provide the nursery habitat that the largemouth bass need to allowing more fish to reach trophy status. Again, we ask anglers to remain vigilant in keeping boats and trailers free of vegetation, and that will minimize the threat of invasive species in the future, because the last thing we want to do is return to the scenario where we go nuclear on vegetation to get rid of something that we don't want, and then have these kind of impacts on our fishing. Success will also be augmented if we can get our anglers to keep smaller bass less than 15 inches. We want to continue to do that going forward as well. We will also be conducting a creel survey in the spring to gather angler data and preferences that will help us build a plan for the future on all of Bella Vista fishing, not just largemouth. And to kind of help us with the grass carp harvest, we're going to implement a raffle system whereby if an angler presents us with evidence that they have caught and kept a grass carp, we give you a raffle ticket. And at the end of the month, we're going to draw for a cash prize. We'll do that monthly through the summer. And then if there's someone doesn't claim their prize, we'll have a bigger drawing the next month. So the specifics of this will come in our sporting update, but that will help us get rid of some of these fish and move this forward a whole lot quicker. But it is a process. This whole thing is a process, and we ask for patience while this is taking place. So there are, before we get into our questions and answers, there are some frequently asked questions, and I'll address those first. Can we empower the lake rangers to enforce harvest regulations? Technically, no. Harvest regulations are set by the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. We have imposed harvest recommendations, which we've talked about before, and we do have the rangers talk to anglers and relay these recommendations when we see them out on the water. Should we stock our lakes with Florida strain or other superior strains of largemouth bass, or at least diversify the genetics of the bass? My answer to that is no. Florida strain largemouth bass do grow large and do well in Florida, where they're from, and the extreme southern Gulf Coast and Texas and South Texas. Northern strain fish do better this far north. A previous study has shown that our Bella Vista bass do have diverse genetics with a mix of northern and Florida strain bass. Additionally, when you have a population that's already overpopulated, the addition of stocked bass really isn't what we need. And because we have if you stock fish, you're going to stock small fish, and they do tend to be cannibalistic, and so our established fish will consume what we stock, and the overall addition to the population would be minimal. And then finally, if you keep the small bass, they will never attain trophy status because they will all have been harvested. And that is a common misconception. I consider that, for the most part, false, because it's impossible to catch and keep everything. In fact, with a lot of effort, we still haven't caught and kept enough of the 10 to 15-inch fish. We can do really good for a year or two, and then what do? They reproduce, and then there's more of those coming along, so we need to remain vigilant. Remaining fish will accelerate their growth because there's less competition for food when there are fewer fish, and then resulting overall in more of the trophy fish that we want to see. So, to review our action steps, and this goes back to the last time we had a good balanced fishery. We removed the parrot feather. Now we need to remove the grass carp. We need to continue to encourage native vegetation, continue with the fertilization program. We're adding artificial habitat. We're adding threadfin shad and bluegill. We need to harvest small bass, and that's where I need the membership's help. And then that will lead to a return of quality largemouth bass. But during this process, it will take time, and again, we need patience with that. Now I can answer any questions you might have.
Is there any plans for additional fish fries like we had last year?
I would like to do that, yes. And I can be more aggressive in advertising for it. The last thing we wanted to do is announce a fish fry and then not have enough fish to go around.
Well, true.
And so what had happened is John happened to have his family in, and he got to eat the whole platter full of fish. He and his family.
great.
They had a tremendous time.
But if you combined it with a participation kind of thing.
Yes, we're gonna.
Yeah.
Maybe
Awesome.
award the raffle at that.
We can do that. We can have a monthly fish fry and award the winner in the raffle during that time. Very good idea, Tom. Anything else?
I have two comments. So early on, there was a chart that showed the population essentially over the years. Ann has shown a tremendous spike during that period in recent years relative to the other lakes. And so I wondered if there was a reason why that it was about a third of the way into, I'll tell you when you get there, but.
I'm gonna kill it.
So I was wondering if there is a reason for that essentially, and then I have another question completely separate of that, right there.
Lake Ann. Lake Ann is the dark.
I believe it's yeah. So it dipped, but then it just had a pretty substantial percentage-wise increase in 22. So
we can get lost in the specifics of a graph like this. What's most important is to see trends over time. This is still kind of within the noise of the other lakes. You have to remember that we go out and we sample once during the spring to get this data. So it could be that a cold front just came through, or it could be that a warm front came through and it allowed us to catch more fish than we normally would. This is a 2022 graph.
yeah.
We do have newer graphs, and I would expect it to kind of continue along this line here.
So the other topic was essentially relative to invasive species of grass, or whatever we want to call it. So obviously that's going to happen, 100%. So
well, I mean, the
it's
likelihood
inevitable, right?
I wouldn't say inevitable, but the chances are high that it could happen again.
Okay.
Maybe not on that lake, but a different lake.
So is there a way that we could publicize, if you see, it's almost like a hit list, wanted, if you see this,
We have
notify
got,
us.
at our kiosks at all of our boat launches, we have a sign, a forget who it was put out, may have been put out by federal, was it Army Corps of Engineers?
Yes.
Okay. Stop aquatic hitchhikers.
Right.
And so we don't have specific pictures of plants.
Right.
When it comes to aquatic vegetation, that parrot feather superficially looks an awful lot like coontail, which is what we want.
Yeah.
And so I'm afraid that if you see this, call us, our phones would light up with things that aren't an issue.
So then when you guys go around and when you're putting out habitat and when you're working on the lakes and
We're on
doing
the lakes.
drawdown, you're always
We're on the
looking-
lakes at a minimum of once a month doing
Right.
our water quality anyway.
Okay.
And we do
Look for that.
look for that kind of thing.
Okay.
And not to say we don't want to hear from it if you see something unusual. By all means, get in touch with us. But those are quite a hitchhiker. That's a mass-produced item. I think we could probably still get more of those. Kind of thing that I can probably take a copy of and put it in our sporting update.
Yeah.
Maybe even put it online. But yeah.
On that note, are the Rangers versed kind of in what to look for? They're up and down all the time.
I talk to them about it. Yeah, when they see something unusual, they'll let me know, and we'll go out and check it out. But I still feel like even though this has caused us a lot of headaches, if parrot feather would have gotten onto all of our lakes, we would be in a world of hurt. And we nipped it in the bud. Unfortunately, it happened to be our primary bass fishing lake, and it has caused us to have a little hiccup, but we're going to get past it. Anybody else?
I'll just add that these aquatic weeds we're talking about, aquatic weeds in general are natives and non-natives. They're all very hard to key out. So even us with a trained eye, we'll have to go out there, grab a sample, take it back to the lab and work it through a book or a key just to make sure we know what we're looking at exactly. They're all notoriously hard to figure out, and there are a lot of species, especially the further down south that you go, there's a lot of species that look even more like some of the natives we were talking about that we don't want here. But again, if you've been in those waters, south of us, and you look at some of the stuff we've got here, you go, oh, that's milfoil or those sorts of things. So they're just really hard to figure out what you've got until you really, really get down to the nitty gritty on it.
Hey, Rick.
Hey.
Tom Marino. I could be wrong with this perception, but from the little bits of information I hear at meetings like this and elsewhere, it seems like some lakes are favored over others in terms of all the resources that you guys have available to put towards the lakes from a fishing perspective. I live on Windsor, as you know, and it seems to me, from the things I hear, that we favor Loch Lomond and Norwood right now because you're doing the work there. How do you decide where to put resources, and if there is a bias, is it a planned bias?
There is not a planned bias. I don't feel like there is a bias. I allocate money based on the surface acres of the lake. So Loch Lomond being 477 acres and Rayburn being 1/10 of that, Loch Lomond's going to get 10 times the resources. But we do, actually, it's not quite that. It's not quite the case, because we do equal amounts of effort on each of the lakes for our fish sampling. We're on each lake an hour in the spring and 30 minutes in the fall doing our electrofishing samples. So
I guess an example would be, I think you said you're going to release 60,000 threadfin shad in Loch Lomond. Is that the only lake that's going to get?
That's the only lake that's getting it this year. That is to combat what we have seen and what we've had to do with eradicating the lake of vegetation. It's a direct reaction to that. Now, that's going to cost us close to $20,000. Resources are finite. If this works out really well, I may be able to convince the purse holders to let some money go for the other lakes for this. And we hope to be able to start producing some of our own. And then there'll be a trickle down to the other lakes as a result of that. So,
Okay,
okay,
thank you.
thank you.
And I want to compliment Rick. During the budget season, Rick made a presentation to the board, asked for additional funding for the threadfin shad and other items, and he did a good job with that request, and it was approved by the board of directors and is included in the 25 budget. So kudos to Rick and his team for a job well done on the budget and making that presentation and request to the board.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. Thanks, Rick, for that presentation. I think it kind of clarifies and at least puts into perspective what we're doing, and we do need patience, and we appreciate all the efforts that you're making to make that happen.
Thank you.
Before we move on, any other questions for Rick or anything today that you guys have to talk about? Let's go to the open forum. Tom, do you have anything that you wanted to say other than what you've already said? Sir, do you have anything? Okay. Next meeting will be February the 8th, Tuesday, Wednesday, February the 8th, same place, same time. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda that we haven't covered, so if nobody has anything. Going once, going twice. Meeting adjourned.